Hello and welcome. In today's discourse, we dive into one of Nigeria's most critical frameworks, the National Counter-Terrorism Strategy, and NACTEST. Terrorism remains a major global challenge, and Nigeria's approach to tackling this threat is essential for ensuring national stability and security. In this video, we'll explore the key pillars of the strategy, including how it integrates military action, community engagement, intelligence, and de-radicalization efforts to combat terrorism on multiple fronts. If you find this discussion important, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on future updates. Also, don't forget to share it with your network to spread awareness, because national security concerns every one of us. Now, let's get started.
Ever feel like keeping up with global security is like, trying to catch smoke?
It's definitely a moving target.
Big time.
Yeah.
Today, though, we're diving into one of the most crucial aspects of it all, national counterterrorism strategies. We're using Nigeria's approach as our case study here, but
Yeah, if it sounds.
the idea is to go deep on how nations are trying to combat terrorism, like in the real world, not just,
Not the headline.
not the headline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a good one to look at, I think, because even though the document we're pulling from focuses on Nigeria specifically, a lot of the insights and challenges they highlight, well, they resonate pretty much globally.
Totally. And the document we're diving into is called An Overview of the Nigerian National Counterterrorism Strategy.
Yeah.
But don't worry about memorizing, like, dry policy details. We're pulling out the most useful takeaways and connecting those to the bigger picture, right?
Right. And I think what's so fascinating about this particular strategy is that it goes beyond just reacting to attacks. It really digs into root causes and emphasizes prevention, which is
It's like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth...
how to cure.
Exactly.
There you go.
And you can really see that proactive approach in their 5 key objectives.
Yeah.
They lay out, let's see, they want to prevent attacks, obviously disrupt terrorist networks, protect citizens and infrastructure, respond effectively if an attack does happen, and then strengthen international cooperation. So 5 pretty big objectives for a huge issue. I got to ask, like, how do they even begin to operationalize those objectives?
Right. Well, that's where the P3R2 pillars come in.
The what?
P3R2.
Okay.
So the strategy breaks down those objectives into 5 key action areas: prevent, protect, pursue, respond, and rehabilitate.
P3R2, catchy. I like it. All right, so let's break these down one by one. Prevent seems, kind of self-explanatory.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
It seems simple on the surface, but it's probably the most complex pillar,
Yeah.
honestly. Because think about it. To actually prevent terrorism, you need to understand what drives individuals toward extremism in the first place.
Okay.
So we're talking about things like poverty, inequality, marginalization, all those sort of breeding grounds for resentment and radicalization that can lead down that path.
So it's about tackling those systemic issues and, like, actively countering the ideologies that fuel extremism.
Yes, exactly. It's about building more resilient communities, promoting tolerance, fostering dialogue,
Oh.
and this could involve educational programs, community outreach, working with religious leaders even, to counter those narratives.
Interesting. So it sounds like prevent is as much about social change as it is about, like, traditional security measures.
I'd say that's a pretty good way to put it.
Okay, fascinating. Now, protect. This is where we see a little bit more of that traditional security focus, right?
Yeah, I think so.
This pillar is about safeguarding critical infrastructure, public spaces, systems from attack. So, like, increased security at airports, protecting power grids, that sort of thing.
Those are good examples for sure.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond just physical security, too.
Okay.
Cybersecurity is a huge part of this pillar as well.
Right.
Think about the potential for attacks on government networks, financial institutions,
Oh, right.
even critical infrastructure that's controlled by computer systems these days.
Yeah, it's almost like you're playing chess,
Yeah,
trying to anticipate your enemy's moves and protect those valuable assets.
absolutely. That's a great analogy. And it highlights just how intricate this whole strategy is, because every single element is connected.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so we've got prevention, we've got protection covered. What about going after the bad guys? That's where pursue comes in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Pursue is all about dismantling those terrorist networks, bringing the perpetrators to justice.
Okay.
And this is where you see the intelligence agencies, law enforcement, international cooperation all coming into play.
We're talking like tracking financial flows, intercepting communications, investigations that go across borders.
That's the heart of it. And this pillar, I think, really underscores how crucial that international collaboration is for tackling a threat like terrorism
Yeah.
that just by its nature is so transnational.
Speaking of international cooperation,
Yeah.
that seems like where things can get especially tricky.
Oh, for sure.
We're going to unpack all those complexities in part 2 of this deep dive.
Definitely lots to unpack there.
Stay tuned. So we talked about preventing attacks, protecting those vulnerable targets, and then pursuing those networks.
Right.
But like you mentioned, international cooperation, that can be a whole thing.
It's essential, no doubt about it.
Right,
Terrorist organizations, they don't really care about our neat little borders.
right.
But when you try to get different countries on the same page, navigating all the different legal systems, figuring out how to share intel without, compromising your own security,
Right.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a really delicate dance.
It is. The document actually highlights a few of the big players,
Yeah.
like the UN, the EU, the African Union, even Interpol.
Yeah, those bodies, they provide the kind of framework for cooperation.
Right.
But the real nitty-gritty work
Yeah.
that always happens between individual nations.
Okay.
And just imagine trying to coordinate these investigations, share intel when you're dealing with different languages, different political climates, different
Right.
levels of trust even.
Yeah, it's wild.
It can get very
It
complicated.
makes you realize how complex this really is. And it's not even just about external cooperation either, right?
Right.
The document also spends a lot of time on respond.
Okay.
So what happens when an attack does occur?
Right. So respond, that's about more than just the immediate law enforcement response, right?
Okay.
It's about the whole system that's in place
Okay.
to minimize casualties, obviously, but also to provide all that support. After the fact, the medical, the psychological support for survivors, getting those essential services back up and running, and managing the information flow
Oh, right.
so that you prevent panic and all the misinformation that can spread.
It's interesting because you're right, that aspect of counterterrorism, the aftermath, the recovery, it's often kind of overlooked in like
Oh, yeah.
the movies and
In the headlines,
yeah,
it doesn't get a lot of attention,
that's a good point.
but it's a really important reminder that these strategies are dealing with human beings, with real communities
Yeah.
that are impacted by violence and fear.
That's a really good point. And that brings us to the final pillar,
Okay.
rehabilitate,
Yeah.
which almost feels like the opposite of pursuing and responding,
In a way, it is.
Yeah.
Rehabilitate focuses on de-radicalization and reintegration.
Okay.
So working with individuals who have been involved in extremism to help them disengage from those ideologies and hopefully, rebuild their lives.
That just feels like a whole other level.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to de-radicalize someone?
It's a long and difficult process,
Yeah.
and it's not always successful,
Right.
but there are programs out there
Yeah.
that focus on things like theological education. So countering those extremist interpretations of, religious texts,
Okay.
vocational training, providing practical skills and opportunities,
Right.
psychological counseling,
Right.
so addressing trauma, and just offering these individuals different pathways.
So it sounds like it requires this deep understanding, not just of the individual's motivations, but also like
Oh, absolutely.
the social context that leads them there.
100%.
But even if you address those root causes, even if you have like a really solid strategy in place, there's still got to be challenges.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there are always challenges, and the document actually talks about some of those.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones, unsurprisingly, is balancing security with civil liberties.
It's that classic dilemma, right?
Totally.
How much freedom are we willing to give up
Exactly.
in the name of security?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And as technology continues to advance, that balancing act is only going to get tougher.
Totally.
Think about the rise of all these surveillance technologies.
All right.
Facial recognition, data collection, even predictive policing.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
tools, they have the potential to prevent attacks. We can't deny that.
Right.
But they also raise these really serious concerns about our privacy and the potential for misuse, which we've seen.
Yeah, and it's not always clear and cut, is it?
Not at all.
It's a slippery slope.
It is, and that's why these conversations are so important.
Right.
We have to be aware of the trade-offs.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have to have these, open and honest discussions about the ethical implications of any kind of counterterrorism measures.
And that tension, between security and freedom,
Yeah.
That's not just a theoretical thing, right? I mean, we've seen real-world examples where these surveillance measures go too far.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Governments overstepping in the name of, combating terrorism.
Yeah. And it's not just governments either.
Really?
You have to think about these tech companies, right?
Oh, right.
I mean, they are collecting tons of data
Yeah.
on everything. Our online activity, our movements, our conversations.
It's a lot.
It is. And that data can be super valuable when it comes to tracking potential threats.
Right.
But it raises some serious questions about privacy
Yeah.
and who actually has access to all that information.
It's tough because on the one hand, you want those agencies to have the tools to keep everyone safe,
Right.
but then you don't want to be constantly tracked and analyzed either.
Yeah. Nobody wants to feel like they're living in some kind of surveillance state, do they?
Right.
It's finding that balance that's tricky.
Yeah.
And that balance we have to constantly be, debating, reevaluating.
Yeah. And that's
Constantly.
you need to keep having that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not even just about individual privacy, is it?
Yeah.
This technology, it can be used to target specific groups or even to silence people.
That's a good point.
So it really makes you think about the potential for discrimination there.
It's almost like you need a whole other strategy to deal with the ethics of it all.
It's true.
Yeah.
And some countries have started to implement, some oversight things, ethical guidelines,
Okay.
legal frameworks, even
Yes.
trying to make sure that these technologies are being used responsibly, at least
Right.
proportionately.
Right.
But it's a work in progress, for sure.
Yeah, it's not like you can just check it off the list.
Exactly. It needs constant vigilance. you
Yeah.
know, From
Yeah.
citizens, from policymakers, from everybody, really.
It makes you realize this fight against terrorism, it's not just about, military stuff or
Well,
intelligence gathering.
It's so much bigger than that.
It's about values.
Right.
It's about ethics. It's about the kind of world we all want to live in.
It really is.
This deep dive has been, I've got to say, it's been eye-opening.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, we've gone from the really specific details of Nigeria's strategy to these huge global challenges
Right.
and ethical questions about, just what it takes to combat terrorism in this day and age.
And it's interesting, too, because a lot of these challenges,
Yeah.
they go way beyond just the counterterrorism stuff.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it. We're grappling with these questions of security and freedom,
Right.
the role of all this technology,
Yeah.
how important international cooperation is.
Right.
I mean, this comes up everywhere.
It's true. It's true.
It affects so many different parts of our lives,
It really does.
and it will continue to.
It's a lot to think about, but these conversations, I mean,
We have to have them.
we can't not have them, right?
Exactly.
So, to everyone listening out there, keep learning,
Yeah.
keep asking those tough questions,
Please do.
and keep these conversations going. Your deep dive, it doesn't end here.
It doesn't end here.
If you found this discourse on the Nigeria's counterterrorism strategy insightful, don't forget to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you never miss out next one. Let's keep this conversation going. Share this video with friends, students, researchers, and other members of the academia for educational purpose. Together, we can raise awareness and promote meaningful dialogue on critical issues. Thanks for watching or listening, and I'll see you in the next one.